Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually sort of on world tour in the fall with Gartner, traveling around to several of our symposia, and I'm talking about 3 different subjects there, and I'm going to blend that material in here. I'm not going to try and cram 3 hours worth of presentation into 20 minutes. What I am going to do is I want to talk to you about 3 major areas. So one's vision and leadership. One's about people and work, thinking about work, and one's about technology and how all these things come together, especially the discontinuities to exploit. I want to begin with some survey data that we collected in January this year. Over 2,000 CIOs responded to a survey, and we asked them 2 questions. The first was, which of these vendors was most influential over the last 10 years in terms of setting technology direction? And those are the blue numbers. Then we asked, which vendors here are the most influential in terms of the future? And now look at the chart, and what you'll see, you'll notice if you look at it carefully, is almost everybody's down in the bottom. Very low level of influence in terms of being the most influential. It's a surprising data set here. We look at Apple. Apple's projected downward. From most influential in the last 10 years. Then we've got Microsoft. Second most influential, dropping down. We've got Google rising up. And this is not a slide created for this event. This is the raw data that we had. And finally, if you look all the way on the right, you'll see that the most influential technology vendor for the next 10 years doesn't exist. Okay, that was the opinion across the CIOs. And really, I think that this is the wrong approach. You shouldn't be looking to vendors to set a vision, to set a direction. You should be looking instead to yourselves. You have to set a vision. You've got to figure out where you're headed. I love the moonshot discussion that we had, that Astro presented. Let me talk a little bit about vision. First, a little biology anecdote, and the anecdote is this. If you study visual systems across species, you'll notice there's 2 types of visual systems. There's the predator's vision, which is foveal, and it's forward, it's wherever you're looking, and you can see some things on the side. Then there are other species that can see 360 degrees around their head. Pigeons, for example, and fowl, and so forth. And they're prey. And so their visual system is built to detect threats and respond to threats. Predators' visual systems are focused. And to be successful, you really need to focus. There's a presentation I give called Tales from the Collaboration Crypt. I've been giving the same material now for a while. It's built on 20 years of experience around collaboration. And one of our fundamental findings is 70 to 80% of collaboration projects fail. The number 1 reason why collaboration investments fail is there's no moonshot type goal. There's no focus. There's, we're going to deploy collaboration tools because everybody else is deploying them. We're going to deploy them because vendor XYZ has said that this is the next great thing that's coming. And to succeed, and I have a question for you, to succeed in your collaboration initiatives with technology, you have to be like a predator. You have to focus on a very specific objective. So it's not, we want to improve collaboration. It's, we want to create and finalize proposals faster. So a very specific objective. So how many of you have collaboration initiatives underway inside your organization today? Paddles up. Okay. Now put your paddles down. How many of those collaboration initiatives have a very specific focused target? A very specific objective? I'm getting no's. And I'm getting some no's and yeses mixed here. Need to focus in. We need to have a vision, not of this broad, I mean, where would we have gone if the moonshot program that put man on the moon was aimed at, we're going to have to build better rockets? Okay, that wasn't the aim. The aim was to go hit the moon. It was a very specific target. And so in collaboration, to succeed, you need a narrow goal, and you need to have a narrow focus on a very small number of people Go observe them, go watch them, go experiment with them, iterate until you found a way to make them phenomenally more successful. That should be a 10x kind of project, not to make 100% of the people in the organization more effective, to make 1% of the people more effective, and then you move from that project to the next to the next. That's a little bit of a statement around vision. Let's think a little bit about work for a couple of moments. Work is changing, and I'll give you one statistic that I like to refer to. In the US, West Germany, the UK, and Japan, from 1980 to 2010, the proportion of jobs that were dominated by non-routine work went from 40% to over 60%, and the trend is continuing. So what's non-routine work? If you draw a flow chart out that describes the nature of work, if you have a box that says magic happens here, that's non-routine. If you can simply describe steps that anybody could follow with no training or understanding, then you've got a routine job. The proportion of jobs that are primarily non-routine is growing dramatically. A big part of that's because of the technology that we're implementing. And the critical issue is now, how do you make people doing non-routine things more effective? And this is where you have to intensely go in. You have to think about what's going on. You have to experiment. You have to try bold new things, very much like Astro was talking about. And I'll give you an example of a bold new thing. 2.5 weeks ago, Fox News rolled out a new news room. And that new newsroom has been roundly criticized by analysts who looked at it and said, this is stupid. What did they do? What Fox did, I'm not talking about their political leaning, I'm talking about the way they laid out the newsroom, is now all the people working in the newsroom have a desk that's a drafting table. And the drafting table is really a 55-inch touch-sensitive tablet. So they can directly interact with the material there, and they also have a keyboard and a mouse because they don't have the right level of precision. In addition, the same company that built the visual effects for Minority Report, Oblong, built for them a special 128-foot wide display on which anybody in the newsroom can put up whatever it is that they're working on. Now, why am I bringing this up? That's a major change in the physical environment of the newsroom. It's a bold experiment. They're willing to try something radically different rather than do what everybody else was doing. And success with these technologies requires narrow, focused, bold experiments that you do over and over again. To get people who are doing non-routine work to change how they work, this is Andy Grove famously said, you've got to make a replacement behavior 10 times as valuable to the person for them to change their behavior, because otherwise people just go back and do whatever the heck they were doing before. That's a little bit about thinking about work. Let's talk about leading and leadership. You know, I have a lot of respect for the people at Microsoft. I'm going to pick on them for a minute. The reason I'm going to pick on them is I believe they suffer severely from the innovator's dilemma. They're locked into what their customers want, and their customers don't want them to change anything in Office, for example. They just want to have the same thing that they've had year in and year out. And so they've been forced to stick with technology that they should have abandoned and replaced dramatically 15 years ago or more. Okay. They're suffering from the innovator's dilemma. They're locked into Windows and Office. And it's because of you that they are. And the problem is that you and the rest of their buyers don't want to see changes in certain areas because you're not thinking anymore about that stuff. The answer is Office, right? Well, maybe it's not. You know, maybe there's a different technology. And maybe it's not Windows. And I'm not trying to go down a technology comparison. My whole point is that there's this whole problem, the innovator's dilemma, and we are all complicit in that problem. We cause it, okay, because we don't go back and we don't set the following kind of criteria. We publish something called the hype cycle. How many of you have seen Gartner hype cycles? Yeah. It's a curve that looks like this. It starts with the initiation, a peak of inflated expectations, a trough of disillusionment, and eventually the plateau of productivity for technology, right? We also publish the antithesis of it. We call it the market clock. It's sort of the termination end of a technology in the market. It's what we describe there. And very few, how many of you, when you make a technology investment in a new approach, how many of you set an expiration date on the decision? How many of you set aside money to divest yourself of the technology you're buying today. So for example, you're buying an ERP system. How long is it going to be good? When are you going to get rid of it? Do you plan on that? Do you plan consciously on whatever it is you're investing in today with great enthusiasm, it'll eventually have to be retired? Or you just hope your successor deals with that problem? Okay. To lead, you have to lead not only by being on the bleeding edge, the first 5% of adopters, you also have to be ready to divest early when the time is right. Okay? Let me move along here. The fourth point, discontinuities. So I want to share with you some discontinuities. And I think there's 6. Let's talk about 5 of them right now. One of them is consumerization. We wrote about consumerization in 1998 because we could project the technology cost curves, and we began to anticipate what would happen as computers like the one that you're using there went to $200. Just a dramatic shift in the industry. We wrote about it first in 1998. In 2005, we went public with a series of presentations around the country. And it's the only time in my career at Gartner that an audience stood up and said, "You're crazy. People aren't going to bring their own machines. We're not going to let them use their own software." They may have been right. We may have been crazy. Okay? But we were onto something that turned into what it is today. So consumerization is a critical one of those disruptions. I think all of us are living through it today. How many of you have BYOD programs today? Bring your own device. Yeah, so it's widespread already. 2, the whole mobile and heterogeneous device model, any device, anywhere, it has been a disruption. Most of us are well plugged into that. Video everywhere. So the use of video for meetings everywhere in the organization and between organizations is a major disruptive trend. The notion of the personal cloud. The idea that you'll have on your personal device your information, your company's information, your social information, family information, and everything else, and it's not to be separated because it's your device and your working environment. The whole notion of the personal cloud is more threatening than the idea of bring your own device, because now it says that IT can't just lock the darn thing down and use the standard management techniques. You've got to move away from locking the device to managing the applications and making sure the applications are secure. Web scale systems is another major discontinuity to exploit. I'll get to the 6th in a moment, but I want to spend a couple of minutes on people. How many of you have seen the Forbes, is it Forbes or Fortune, the 100 best places to work survey data? Gets published every year. Okay. Any of you on it, by the way? Any of your firms on it? Cool. That's good. If you look at that data, that companies that are rated as best places to work by their employees perform better from a financial point of view. So there's a correlation there. I'm not saying that there's a causation. But you have to ask yourself now, who didn't put their paddle up? Where do you stand? What's the level of employee engagement inside your organization? We've come to realize that we've evolved our coverage of workplace technology. We used to talk about high-performance workplaces and workplace technology. We shifted a few years ago to people-centered strategies. We shifted again this year. That same coverage area is now called the Engagement Initiative. Why? Because it's no longer about technology, it's about engaging employees. More than 80% of employees in US firms report that they're unengaged at work. So what can we do to make them more effective and to engage them better on the job? I run a program inside Gartner. I've run this program for 10 years now. One of the good things about Gartner, when you pick up a piece of Gartner research, you know it's been vetted by a community of peers who are experts in that space. One of the bad things about picking up a piece of Gartner research is you know that it's been vetted by a community of peers in that space. So all the rough edges are taken off. It's polished, it's consistent, it's well spoken, it considers all the different angles, and that leads to, sometimes it leads us to be too narrow in our thinking. So I run a program a third of my time for the last 10 years to get people out of their comfort zone, to get them to propose disruptive ideas, disruptive lines of research that we then will then crowdsource an evaluation of all these disruptive ideas. We give everybody permission to stop being consensus driven, to stop being, wise, reasoned people with a lengthy period of time in a particular domain, and we encourage them to come up with entirely new lines of research that are disruptive. And so we start with a big funnel. We had 200 out of 900 analysts contributed this year to that program. We eventually came down to 25 projects that we green-lighted. We gave people 25% of their time off for 6 months to work on that project, and most of them delivered. We canceled some of the projects because they weren't going to effectively deliver. So we spend 2% of our actual research labor goes into this program, but it generates a majority of the disruptive new lines of research that we come out with. So that's an example of focusing in on people. The other thing to think about, let me turn to the last subject, it's smart machines. There's a book, Natural Born Cyborgs, by Andy Clark. He used to be at Indiana. He's now at University of Edinburgh. And he talks about how humans use technology. So when somebody asks you what time it is, if you still wear a watch, many people now only carry a cell phone, right? But shoot your arm out. You know what the time is because it's right there. If you play tennis, when you go to hit a tennis ball and you swing through the ball, if you've had any lessons and experience, you learn to put topspin on it. You don't even think about how you're putting the topspin on. It's a reflexive behavior. You've incorporated the technology and the behavior into muscle memory. You're not even thinking about what you're doing. And we think that there's a class of technology we call smart machines. What are they? They're autonomous. They use deep neural networks. They understand meaning in big data. There are examples. We see Google Now is one example of a smart machine technology. It's a virtual personal assistant. We also see Siri. We see Microsoft. Microsoft has a project in this space that they haven't announced, but it's up on YouTube. Eric Horvitz from Microsoft Research is demonstrating their personal assistant, their virtual personal assistant. IBM has Watson. These are all different technologies that aim, and they're very different one to the next in their capability and where they're going. I just point out two I think are the more interesting examples. One is Watson. Watson is a very narrow but deep technology. They have a clinical oncology advisor that they've developed with two different medical institutions now that can help a clinician. What the technology does is it reads a few 100 million pages of scientific research. It reads the health record of the patient, and it either provides suggestions back to the oncologist or asks questions. And the suggestions are ranked, and they're based on the evidence that was available, and sometimes it'll ask a question, suggested another piece of data is needed to come up with a strong recommendation for a treatment. These are enormously fascinating technologies with what they do. And we think that there was a wonderful video, the Apple Knowledge Navigator. It's up on YouTube. Does anybody remember this? It's from 1987. It was Apple's vision for a personal assistant. The professor walks in to his office, and his tablet starts to talk to him and tells him about his upcoming appointments, his mother's telephone call to him, so it's not all work stuff, some research that's been done by a professor in another country that relates to a project he's working on. Apple put that together to reflect where they were going to go, and they came out with Newton, which failed, and they came out with Siri, eventually is sort of succeeding. Who knows where it's going to go, but it's a very powerful set of images in the area of smart machines. And as I look back over this century, other than mobile, I've seen no major advances in technology that enhance non-routine work. None. This is going to be the first. This is a breakthrough set of technologies that we're recommending. We just started covering it in April of this year. All of these smart machines. It includes self-driving automobiles and construction equipment and so forth. I think there's a real opportunity there to make people more effective.